What truly happens in the aftermath of a full-scale global nuclear war? We've all seen the familiar Hollywood depictions of the desolate post-nuclear wasteland in which most of the population is wiped out due to starvation and sickness. Usually, the central fear that's associated with nuclear war isn't the bombs themselves, it's the radiation, the ensuing breakdown of society, and the dreaded nuclear winter that follows. Most of these concerns are warranted, but one may be grossly overblown. What if we told you that the people who were peddling the theory of nuclear winter were doing just that, peddling a theory? And what if we told you that it might be in the interest of our adversaries for people to be so demoralized by this hypothetical nuclear winter outcome that they choose not to prepare at all?
Under the nuclear winter theory that we're discussing, the fierce aftermath of a nuclear attack would send plumes of smoke, soot, and dust from burning cities, industrial sites, and forests lofting high into the atmosphere, blocking out most of the light and drastically reducing land temperatures. Under such conditions, survivors of a nuclear holocaust would face extended darkness and freezing temperatures. Rivers and lakes would freeze over, plant life would wither, and food production would be virtually eliminated in the ghoulish season of nuclear winter.
Do you ever hear people say things like,
I would want to go out with the blast because I wouldn't want to survive the aftermath?
This fatalistic point of view is common among those who don't understand the following. 1. That nuclear war is survivable. 2. That you'll probably survive whether you like it or not. 3. You won't be fatalistic when you realize that you're still alive. And 4. You'll end up being a drag on those around you who have prepared. This concept of nuclear winter is part of the reason why people are reluctant to prepare for such an event. They have been told that in the years and decades following a nuclear event, all the world will be an irradiated, cold hellscape where all signs of life have disappeared from Earth. Let's talk about why this is not only extremely exaggerated, but likely totally false. In 1983, Carl Sagan and a group of fellow scientists known as the TAPS Group published a paper entitled Global Atmospheric Consequences of Nuclear War, upon which the foundation of the nuclear winter theory would be based. In October of that year, Sagan wrote an article for Parade magazine stating,
"The results of our calculations astonished us. In the baseline case, the amount of sunlight at the ground was reduced to a few % of normal, much darker in daylight than in a heavy overcast, and too dark for plants to make a living from photosynthesis. Even more unexpected were the temperatures calculated. In the baseline case, land temperatures, except for narrow strips of coastline, dropped to -25°C and stayed below freezing for months, even for a summer war. Because the temperatures would drop so catastrophically, virtually all crops and farm animals, at least in the northern hemisphere, would be destroyed, as would most varieties of uncultivated or domesticated food supplies. Most of the human survivors would starve."
This article became a pillar for anti-nuclear activists. It was subsequently regurgitated and recycled in all different types of media as the inevitable guaranteed outcome of a nuclear war between what was then the Soviet Union and the United States. This was not the case in the Soviet Union. They had conducted their own studies on the climactic effects of large-scale city burnings after a nuclear blast. They had determined that any effects of so-called nuclear winter were minor, albeit noticeable over a short period of time. The propaganda wing of the Soviet government leaned into Sagan and company's warnings of an unsurvivable nuclear winter in order to demoralize the United States and further stoke Americans' fears of a potential nuclear strike, all the while knowing full well that the predictions were grossly exaggerated and flawed, and that nuclear war was very survivable. The nuclear winter revelation was brought before Congress, and upon hearing these dire warnings that Sagan and his team was issuing, decided to dedicate large sums of money toward further research of a potential nuclear winter. In 1986, a pair of atmospheric scientists, Starley Thompson and Stephen Schneider, published an article in the summer issue of Foreign Affairs titled Nuclear Winter Reappraised, which reported the following.
The TAPS group began to use a computer model to study the effects of war-generated smoke and dust on the Earth's climate. The model was one-dimensional. That is, the model had no geography, no winds, no seasons, instantaneous spread of smoke to the hemispheric scale, and no feedback of smoke washout by rainfall.
Snyder and Thompson extensively modeled nuclear war scenarios using this more detailed and realistic system, which included these variables such as ocean activity, natural geography, rainfall, wind, and greenhouse effects. The results indicated, rather than months or years-long nuclear winter, that North America could experience a kind of nuclear fall, in which we would see average temperatures drop by 20 degrees Fahrenheit for just a few days.
On scientific grounds, the global apocalyptic conclusions of the initial nuclear winter hypothesis can now be relegated to a vanishing low level of probability. It is still quite plausible that climatic disturbances, radioactive fallout, ozone depletions, and the interruption of basic societal services, when taken together, could threaten more people globally than would the direct effects of explosions in a large nuclear war.
Furthermore, not all nuclear scenarios are going to lead to the 6,500 megaton exchange scenario used as the basis for Sagan's 1983 investigation. The MAD, or Mutually Assured Destruction scenario, in which all nuclear superpowers fire all their nukes, is but one rendition of the escalation ladder. Preemptive decapitation strikes, tactical nuclear exchanges, or even limited strategic exchanges between superpowers that don't exceed the mutually assured destruction threshold are well within the realm of plausibility, especially with the advent of new defensive technologies such as cyber warfare, AI, and space-based weaponry. Around the time of this critical response to Sagan's paper, the denuclearization movement in the United States was quickly gaining momentum in light of the weapons buildup and statements of US President Ronald Reagan. Many anti-nuclear protests were being held, including in 1982 when 1 million people demonstrated in New York City's Central Park against nuclear weapons and for an end to the Cold War arms race. This was the largest anti-nuclear protest and the largest political demonstration in American history. Thompson and Snyder faced enormous backlash for publishing these findings and were labeled as fascists by disarmament supporters. It seemed the political will was strong enough to suppress the message, and the prevailing theory of an unsurvivable nuclear winter remained. Despite the deeper scientific research into the topic, these exaggerated predictions are still commonly believed and being peddled by many commentators on the subject. One example of this is in Annie Jacobson's new book, Nuclear War. In this book, she promotes the nuclear winter hypothesis as being a fact, when in fact it is still very much just a theory, and one that is arguably being used by our adversaries to ensure that people do not prepare. So whenever somebody says something like, "Don't bother preparing for a nuclear war because it's not survivable," remind them that not only is it survivable, but the odds are very good that you will survive and have to deal with the aftermath. The adversaries of the West are aware of this and are making preparations because they believe nuclear war is survivable. It's incumbent upon Western governments and their populations to have a plan for the worst-case scenario, especially in light of such a tumultuous geopolitical climate. If you want more information about this topic, check out the book Nuclear War Survival Skills, far and away one of the most comprehensive guides to nuclear war and its survivability. Thanks for watching Canadian Prepper.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com, where you'll find high-quality survival gear at the best prices, no junk, and no gimmicks. Use discount code PREPPINGGEAR for 10% off. Don't forget, the strong survive, but the prepared thrive. Stay safe.